Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to Business Line's State of Economy podcast. This is your host Haripriya, tech reporter for the publication. In today's episode, we will be discussing India's position and its evolving significance in the changing global tech landscape, where the burgeoning AI technology is bringing fundamental shifts. To give us more insights, we have with us today Sindhu Gangadharan, SVP and MD SAP Labs India and Vice Chairperson nasscom, Sangeeta Gupta, Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at nasscom, and Jagdish Mitra Head, India Business and Corporate Affairs for Tech Mahindra. Thank you for joining us today, folks.
I'll ask Sindhu to start. Sure. Haripriya, we've been talking about this a couple of times, right? I mean, already, I think the last time we met was, end of December, you were here at our campus. But if I just reflect back, I mean, India over the years, Haripriya has clearly made incredible strides in technology and particularly also on the digital economy, right? I mean, if you just reflect upon the fact that from the development of digital public infrastructure to high performance computing, right? India's technology prowess has clearly shaped the business landscape, like we all would agree. I mean, if I just reflect upon the last decades, from being the global IT outsourcing hub, today it is the breeding ground, if you ask me, of innovation, entrepreneurship. And I think the journey has been clearly awe-inspiring, right? And today, if you just look at where we find ourselves, it's really this convergence, if you may will, of digital technologies. We have a very vibrant startup ecosystem. And I think what really adds to everything is also the government committed to fostering that digital first economy, right? And I think that secret sauce behind India's disruptive growth in the tech sectors is really that very robust ecosystem which brings together a brilliant and an expansive talent pool, that entrepreneurship mindset, operational excellence, and like I said, also a very supportive policy framework. If you just look at just sheer numbers, I mean, the rise in internet users expected to reach 900 million by 2025, right? I mean, if you just look a couple of years back, it was, and this is even primarily also from the rural areas, right? So it's also propelling that kind of technology growth. Or similarly, if you just look at all the digital payments, I mean, this has clearly played a very pivotal role in driving the industry as well. If I just look at the number of transactions that we had in digital transactions, 134.6 billion digital transactions. So that's like totally skyrocketed. And if I just put on my lens from also running one of the biggest GCCs here, India has time and again emerged as the top choice for global companies to drive innovation, access the skilled talent, groom the next generation of leaders, and also build world-class products, right? I mean, we are doing that here. And I think clearly, if I see from that lens as well, India has clearly cemented itself as the premier destination for global capability centers just like ours, right? And as we speak, Haripriya, this whole blueprint of GCC 4.0 is being redrawn, right? And India is right at that, if you may will, at the epicenter of this shift. I mean, today we have over 1,600 plus GCCs and many more coming. Pretty much every week I'm in conversations with somebody who says, hey, we want to expand in India. Tell us about your learnings. And so that's like almost like an everyday conversation today, right? And India is clearly poised to be, or it has become the GCC capital of the world. So all in all, I mean, in a nutshell, I think it's really that convergence of talent, technology, all the collaborative efforts and very supportive government policies, which is driving this kind of shifts in India's tech landscape, leading to this era of optimism, very transformative growth, which we all refer to as what is coined by nasscom and Debjani as the techade, you know. I think, we've
India has multiple ecosystems, right? So there is the technology services ecosystem, there is the startup ecosystem, there's the whole digital public infrastructure that we are seeing, plus the manufacturing ecosystem that's now coming up. So if you think about the value chain, right from your operations to your design to your technology to manufacturing, I think India is going to offer or is already starting to offer the entire value chain and at scale, because you can have multiple countries doing a bit of it here and there, and you can really do this at scale. So I think to add to everything Sindhu said, I think that is what is going to be India's differentiator. And if I think of it 5 years back, it wasn't, it was largely about services. But today when people talk to us and when we are talking and hosting some of these global companies, it's all about the awe that they have around especially the whole digital public infrastructure space and, the model that India has built without spending billions on making it happen. I'll hand this to Jagdish.
I think to the stuff that Sindhu and Sangeeta spoke about, I think there are a few things that are making us optimist. One, I think from a large way, the very fact that over the years, India's tech services industry and the GCCs that Sindhu just talked about have been able to establish and serve some of the largest businesses globally, right? So there is no such single market that depends on India today. There's almost every market that you can think about depends on India today to be able to do their key stuff. And I think I want to highlight the role of not just IT services, but IT enabled services. The business process knowledge that we've gained in the whole process is going to be of tremendous value as new technologies come into play, whether it's AI or Web3 or quantum. At the end of the day, what India today has is not just skilled talent on coding, but it also has a very strong knowledge base of business process. And that's what ultimately transforms and changes from time to time in order for people to be relevant for the future. So what do? You actually take a business process, either you squeeze it or you re-alter the whole way of thinking. But for that, some basic knowledge of the business process is very critical. And whether you take any industry, telecom, banking, manufacturing, healthcare, retail, look at the way product development that companies like Sindhu's do here, that itself is going through a significant change. So you have a huge knowledge base of not just people who know coding language, but you also have a significant knowledge base of people who know business processes. And then on top of it, I think we've been, at least on some of these things, fairly ahead in terms of at least knowing and talking about it. Take AI, for example. I mean, our AI policy was done in 2018, if I'm not wrong. And obviously things will change as time goes on. But we're taking cognizance of the fact that there is things like technology that are important for the growth of the country. And that's a very good part, because today the volume of digital payments that Sindhu talked about, or the DPIs that Sangeeta talked about, has resulted in an economic growth for the country. And that is a clear indication that tech is no longer an outsider. It's very embedded in every business that we do. So it's not a good old EDP department type discussion. I can name to you multiple Indian businesses that I have been in touch with, have set up their own specialized tech teams. They're hiring data scientists, they're hiring analysts, they're hiring, people who will actually get into the core of the data. That's such a beautiful and refreshing change. Yes, it could be competitive for people like us in the services industry, but it also pushes us to be a lot more sharper in what value we add. At the end of the day, I think it makes great competitive sense. And then India suddenly is not just talking about a bank which is legacy or a manufacturing setup that is legacy or a pharma industry. You're producing some of the best in the world right from here. And that, I think, expands the whole base of the global coverage that India can deliver. It's not just about coders, but also about people who can think the whole end-to-end business process of what an industry can need for the future.
A lot of thoughts to unpack there, guys. But if we rewind a little bit and we see 2023 was a tough year globally with the persistent macroeconomic challenges that were seen. But India has not been affected as much, and in turn, more people actually turn to India to optimize their operations and drive value. we see this as more and more tech companies are rapidly expanding their India functions, SAP itself, right? So in the changing global economic landscape, how does India fit into the picture? And going forward, what kind of role does India assume here? And what is the progress that can be made in an environment like this?
Yeah, maybe I can get started, and again I'll put on my SAP hat as well, Haripriya, if you don't mind. But I think India's resilience stems from a combination of factors, right? I mean, many of which all of us talked about, and it's a very unique to this very dynamic market landscape that we have, right? And one of the primary drivers for this kind of resilience is definitely India's very robust and very diverse economy, right? And we have a very large consumer base as well, which is also equally attractive, right? And that coupled with this increased urbanization also creates that very strong domestic market itself, right? That continues to attract investment and also drive that economic activity. And like I said, if I just put on my SAP hat, I can just talk about the phenomenal growth that SAP is seeing in India, right? And now India has grown as a strategic location for SAP over the last few years, right? I mean, Haripriya, we've been in India for the last 25 years, and today India has emerged as the largest R&D hub for SAP globally. In fact, 40% of SAP's R&D workforce, as you know, is sitting out of India, right? And 25% of the patents that are filed out of SAP come out of India. And not just that, right? Going back to my earlier point, it's our fastest growing market for SAP globally. So that is a very unique and a very powerful mix that India offers to SAP, and for all the other reasons that we also talked about, be it the talent, be it the ecosystem, be it the all of that coming together. And that is also the case for many others as well, just like us, right? And for us, talking about investments, SAP is investing also into a new campus in Bangalore near the airport, and twice the size of our headquarters here in Whitefield, right? So it's almost double of this. And this will also attract 15,000 plus additional workforce. So that's the kind of attention that India is receiving today. And to quote our CEO, Christian Klein, India is clearly a winner in the next phase of globalization. So it's really no surprise that more and more companies like ours are really leveraging that India advantage, Haripriya, and also investments continue to flow into India. And I think that's also going back to the fact that why India has emerged as the silver lining, if you may will, to a dark cloud post-pandemic.
Well, I think for us in the services industry, the results will show that it's been a mixed year, right? So from a perspective of the nature of the business that we do, a large amount of our business is dependent outside of India. And that, I think, hasn't grown at the same pace that it grew a couple of years back. But I think the good part of this is that there are already some very significant green shoots, okay, which basically means the level of discussion that we are having with our clients is extremely good in terms of the size of engagements, but more than that, the quality of engagements. I think the amount of digital transformation discussions that we've had in the last 6 to 8 months, I don't think we've had in the last 4 years. The volume of those transformations that we are talking about, including, transforming the value, all of us, are in that paradigm which was called data is the new oil, right? So every company worth their salt captured whatever data they could capture. Now the time has come to answer, what do we do with it? How do we get value out of that data? And I think that's the opportunity that we are seeing, not just in Tech Mahindra, but also across our peer groups in IT services. And the second thing, just to add to it, is I think there is some interesting work for example, us and Mahindra as a group, us and some other similar groups of, I can't name them because it's probably privy to being mentioned, but they are large groups and mid-sized groups and digital natives, where we are creating jointly global platforms that we can take to the world outside. I think that's a huge plus, because now we are creating these platforms that can be added on top of our services story as an add-on to we can take. And the big thing that India brings is scale. No bank, no manufacturing setup, no pharma, no telecom company in the world runs at the volume and scale at which India's businesses at this level run. So if there is a tech product that we can take here jointly, that tech product is for everything else, one for cyber and second for scale, is very well tested. Because when you are doing at that volume, your cyber testing and your resilience to cyber is very high. So I think 2-3 things that added, and in this, like Sindhu mentioned about the scale, one of the things we realized and we did from a TechM perspective, and my peer group also did a lot of work in it. We went to all the tier 2, tier 3 cities in this period. And that really, I think, is one big India story that I think nasscom and the rest of the people should be extremely proud of, is that now it's not limited to the big cities. We are in the Indores of the world and Coimbatores of the world and Durgapurs of the world or Ranchis of the world and so on and so forth, or Jaipur and Chandigarh definitely. So these are places from where now our development happens. So it's a great story about democratizing the whole process.
Sir, you're still on the spot because you gave me the segue to my next question. The IT services industry so far is the significant pie of India's tech landscape. It's what we built our reputation on, right? But we see this in this phase, all the low-hanging fruits are gone. This is more of a sedate growth pace. As you said, the year has been tough. Going forward, how do you think, when we speak about the decade to come, right? How will Indian IT industry reinvent itself? We see a lot of evolution happening there, being more consulting led. So what are the players in industry thinking right now? What will be the next major growth vector?
I don't think there is, when we say low hanging fruits, I think we got to reclassify what do we mean by that. If it's support and administrate and end user computing and that kind of stuff, that's bound to change as our compute habits change. We are no longer compute in the same manner. We don't use our devices the same way. We don't use work the same way. So that's going to change for sure. But remember that for us in the industry, one of the big things has been transitioning from one technology to the other. Whether it was year 2000 where we transitioned, then we changed from there to the application products, of which SAP is one of them, and you suddenly see us becoming big SAP partners or big Oracle partners or big Microsoft partners or whatever, to the cloud partnerships that again became a part of the journey. So each of them had a transactional and a transformational change in the way business uses technology. And it's a no-brainer that the next business use technology is about generative AI. And therefore, the ability for Indian industry to be able to address the opportunity that generative AI throws at it. And you've seen the latest quote about not too far off last week, Satya coming to Mumbai and talking about 2 million people that they plan to train from Microsoft on AI. All of us as business groups, whether it is TechM or whether it is TCS or Infosys or Wipro or Mindtree or whatever else that we have all called out big investments in training and retraining our skills and resources. Obviously, it means rethinking. And that's why I want to go back to the first message that I mentioned, Haripriya, about how our knowledge of the way the businesses work are extremely critical as we apply new technologies. Because no new technology is going to be bereft of knowledge of how the business works. And that's where the biggest strength for Indian IT services industry lies. I think you'll see a significant upswing in the way these get applied to both automation, productivity gains, but also to create new services, new products for our clients. And that's the new area of growth. As we see transforming the journey of our businesses, our customers, on leveraging these new tech like Gen AI in delivering productivity to their internal systems and to be able to capture new markets or new product services. That's the new opportunity area for all Indian IT services companies. And you can see that change, right? The Indian IT services companies are now a lot more focused on positioning, branding as well, which basically means that we are now recognizing the fact that these companies are now more holistic Their opportunity to be able to position themselves is now. And I think Sangeeta touched upon it. All of us are invested now from design to implementation. So in the sense, all the creative elements of design to the infrastructure elements of support and operations and all of that will all go. So in my term, I call this as run, change and grow. So tech industry in India was all about run. How do I run your business? BAU has started to become a lot more change, which is where the digital transformation of the elements happened. We did work for transforming banks to become digital banks, telcos to become digital telcos, blah, blah, blah. Now is the chance for India to leverage all the stuff that we do with Gen AI, etc., to be the grow partner of our customers. So that's the journey I see for Indian IT to grow, Indian IT services to grow.
I can add to that, Haripriya. One is, I don't think we should write the death of this industry, right? I think it's still there, it is still growing, and it will continue to grow. So I think, that's the first part of what I want to emphasize, that I think despite global slowdown, we continue to grow as a sector. And there's significant untapped opportunity even within IT services, right? I mean, Jagdish talked about the generative AI and all the other changes that are lying, which is the grow part of the business. But even within the run part of the business, right, there is significant opportunity. You see Europe and how that's coming up. Sindhu's company, SAP, is already very invested in India, but there are so many German enterprises that are not done enough in India. So there's a lot of room to do much more in India than what they have done. And I think the current environment where everybody is saying, I need to be more cost efficient, I need to figure out what's the next thing, where can I find talent at scale, India's tech services will offer that opportunity. Secondly, if you see GCCs, right, while India has done very well and we have these 1580 or 1600 GCCs, there is a lot of companies that have not yet explored India. So we just did an analysis of the global 2000 companies who are R&D spenders. And I think India has still less than 25%. So the scope to grow in India, whether it's in the GCC, whether it's in the product engineering segment, whether it's in the, some of the more traditional services also, even that is significantly high. So I would say that and I think if you just look at data of this year, the deal signing of this industry has been amongst the highest. So it's taking longer to convert because of different pressures at the client side, but you will start seeing that changing. So I would just say that the headroom for growth still continues to be very, very high.
That's quite optimistic to hear. So yes, we are not writing the death of the industry yet, ma'am. While we're speaking about AI, I mean, it's everything, it's just AI all over. So I want for you guys to weigh in, given how diverse a country is, the kind of scale we have and the unique set of challenges that we come with. How is this technology going to fundamentally change things? And what is the role all the stakeholders, the companies, the government is supposed to play? And what are the things that will be happening going forward?
I think, Haripriya, if you just look at AI, you're right. I mean, there is indeed a explosion of AI all over, right? But if you just put on the India lens, right, we have enormous potential for driving the AI revolution. If you just look at the investments into India's AI capabilities, I mean, it's just, if you just look at the sheer numbers, it's expected to touch $881 million just this year, right? And also agri-tech is one of the key investment areas here in India, where we know that Indian investors are focusing big time on AI. Or if you just look at the semiconductor industry, right, that's also a huge backbone for the Indian AI market. And so all in all, if you just look at the market itself, the Indian AI market will be worth $7.8 billion, right? And today, Haripriya, India aspires to position itself as the global AI hub, right? And all of this is also related again to the government regulations that have been put into place. And I do want to call out also the government's efforts in working very closely with us, with nasscom, tech companies like all of us, to form also the AI regulations as part of the Digital India Act, right? And one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the future of technology can only be driven much better if we are talking about not just looking at it purely from our lens, but that having that deep international collaborations, countries also coming together. Government needs to come together to establish that solid institutional framework between countries, because consumers will sit across, right? And so it's very important that when we build platforms at scale, we need to have well-defined guardrails as well, which would be key when we talk about things like accountability and all of that. So governments really need to have that pro-innovation approach, right, that maximizes the value for these technologies. Because if I just look at different governments, if I look at Europe, for example, it's very much inherently based on regulation for the rights of the citizens, right? Whereas if you just look at US, it's really regulations for the markets. And going by what also Minister Chandrasekhar has been saying, India's approach is clearly going to be a hybrid approach. It's a combination of both, right? And so I think that's also very unique, that we think very from a global perspective and not just putting on our lens as just doing it in one way, or that's the only way. And I think that's a very holistic way of looking at things. And here again, going back to also the nature of the use cases, right? There's so many real life use cases, be it in healthcare, like I said, agri-tech, governance, also the language translation to really maximize that economic development. And again, I reflect back upon the conversation again with Minister Chandrasekhar, where he clearly said, right, we'll go back into that lines of what we did with digital public infrastructure, just like how we did it with Aadhaar and UPI. So we will take that similar DPI approach also for AI here in India. So I'm totally excited about the possibilities that this is going to unlock for India as a whole. And also solving some real life problems, but also for entrepreneurs to kind of build upon the stack, right? So all in all, very exciting times ahead.
Just to add to that, Haripriya, I think clearly AI will provide that additional fillip that India needs, right? I think Nandan said this, we build the digital public infrastructure, which is built on data that is now available. So how do you transition DPI from being infrastructure to digital public intelligence, right? So that's really the next phase that we are seeing it. I think applications, whether it's healthcare, right? Think of how many people, and I think during COVID, we were able to use telemedicine so well, but if all your health records are available and, drug discovery can happen so much faster. So clearly for the size of India, given our diversity, our, different profile of folks, everything that's so different in one part of the country to another part of country, right? AI can provide that binding force because it will enable these language barriers to disappear. It will enable access to content, information that was not available. It will help education because, you don't have teachers. How do you enable students to learn in remoter areas? So given the fact we've built out the digital foundation, I think AI and intelligence coming on top of it will address many of these issues. And I think, Jagdish talked about the services industry. I think it can be just another pivot point for the services industry because it creates a whole new opportunity. Today, it's not about the next RFP. Today, it is about, okay, these are the use cases. Because of my knowledge of the customer, having done their operations, having done their technology, we can go tell them this is how you can think about doing something different, right? So you truly move towards that partnership phase. And of course, I think there are people in India, whether you take Sarvam or you take Krutim, you take the Bharat GPT by IIT Bombay, people are trying to build the foundational models also. So it's not as if we are only playing at the lower levels, right? I think there is aspiration to play the entire stack again here.
Absolutely. There's every discussion that we are talking about, we've had 1,500 odd AI startups, more than 4 billion plus in funding. And to the context of both what Sindhu and Sangeeta talked about, the huge opportunity in transforming India. And I think the Prime Minister made a very good comment about it, which is about saying that obviously we all know globally, but especially in India, this has the right power to be able to build or disrupt. And I think therefore the role of government is very critical along with organizations like nasscom, because we will have to build guardrails. We'll have to build guidelines of how to use. Organizations like us have tremendous responsibility to train our people on what to do and what not to do, and what is ultimately this whole language about ethical AI. So I think that opportunity, and India can be an absolute shining beacon of it. As I said, we can be volume and the language that we talked about. I mean, this is not to be meant to be an advertisement jingle, but we in TechM also are doing a huge amount of foundational model with Bhashini on a proper project called Indus. The whole idea is primarily about seeing the opportunity. And Sangeeta talked about the services industry's excitement, but I think that's a tremendously new ball game for us. I mean, imagine us now telling our people, because of again going back to the fact that we understand that very well, where will Gen AI help them in improving their business process? What will it deliver to them? Who better than people like us between our IT and BPO companies and the GCCs to tell our customers how to leverage it and how to make sure it works for them better? Yes, it would require huge amount of reskilling. In nasscom, we do future skills. In NSDC is very active on this. Each of them will play a very important role. And, that opportunity of learning and reskilling is being enabled for people. And I'm glad that's happening at scale.
You guys talked about the kind of work that has already happened in the last year in regards of AI, the Indic LLMs and all the applications that are being built on it. How do these fare in comparison to the global scenario, the kind of progress that has been made in the other countries? So where do we stand in this race?
I think you're comparing US and saying, how do we fare against an OpenAI or a Google or a Meta? I mean, I think those are traditionally the big tech providers, right? I think India is starting up. So I think comparisons would be unfair to that extent. But I think given that you're doing this at extremely affordable costs, you're doing this with much less access to compute and resources, I think it's commendable on where we are doing. But yes, we have a long way to go. So I wouldn't say we've really reached there as of now. But the fact that we are willing to, invest, make the effort, put all our resources there to make it happen, I think that's really the exciting part here.
I think all companies are, Haripriya, realizing, and I'm sure Sindhu is realizing, we are realizing that we're investing in talent even more now than ever before. And I think, India has a whole source of talent in the sense whether it's our IITs or IITs -1 or, IITs -1, -2, the level of talent that we are getting out of here is tremendous. And I think all of us are realizing, and even the enterprises are realizing, the objective of getting the right talent. And like Sangeeta said, I think it's the classical question that every time sometimes people ask and don't know where to remind people that why is India not building a product? I mean, someone will build the product, someone will drive the product train also, right? So the point is that there'll always be two sides of the story. But from our perspective, I think, yes, I mean, if you compare it, like we said, that, the research and the innovation labs that are put up in maybe China or US, India has still got to catch up a little bit on that. But the very fact that our base strength is the talent and the people. And we are recognizing that and we are building them into the whole skilling program and training and transforming them is a big story, I think, which again makes India able to deliver those goods that we're going to be needed for the future. Ultimately, you will need both sides of the coin.
And Haripriya, talking about building products, like if you may allow me to give again an example from SAP, right? I mean, we have built SAP's what we call as our generative AI assistant called Joule. Okay. If I just look at the amount of work that went into, but before that, what is Joule, right? You can almost think about it as an assistant for your enterprise business processes. So it goes across our cloud portfolio, right? Joule helps our customers to get very quick results on enterprise processes I'm talking about. And big part of that, almost 80% of that development of Joule, how we embed Joule across the business process happening right here in India for the world, right? Where you can ask Joule in a very simple question in plain language, and our users can get very smart answers, which is tapped from a whole pool of data across our portfolio. Just to also put it from a product perspective, right? It's not just about consuming what has been built, but it's also building products, leveraging the technology for the world. We're talking about serving 500,000 customers out there, right, as we speak.
We're all very optimistic for the future to come, for the decade that we have ahead. So, and in tandem with that, the policy has to change for the better as well. So what do you guys think are the kind of policy changes or the incentives that are required for the tech sector to grow?
So I think, one of the biggest ones, I think the industry has had a great support from the government over the years. And Sindhu's already talked about the AI regulation piece of it, which is very balance innovation with risk. So I'm not covering all of that. But I think to drive true R&D in India, I think that is where, we will need to think through what are the right enabling frameworks that would be needed. How can you better partner with academic universities for more IP creation to happen in India? A lot of patent filing is now happening in India, but how do you think about not, from some of the academic universities, where is the lab to market and how that is getting supported? So I would say greater emphasis on the R&D innovation story. I think the second piece, which you heard a lot on this call, is talent and skills. So I think the more policy effort changes that can be done to drive better learning outcomes in our schools and colleges, especially as AI comes in, I think those would be my top two asks from the government, right, from a policy perspective. I don't want to talk about SEZ laws and work from home. I think those are ongoing issues that are, that we keep working on.
Yeah. I fully agree with you, Sangeeta. I think it's really simplifying the regulatory processes, and again, to Sangeeta's point, this cross-industry collaborations, right? That I think and very strategic partners that go into defining also these policies. And this is also where nasscom plays a very important role to really bring that knowledge of how we do things to the actual policies, I think, which is super important. And if our whole focus is on how we stimulate that innovation, I think that is key. And it can only happen with partnerships and the knowing of how we do things,
I think R&D for sure. For the other areas, I think one of the things that I think probably can be done is a lot more about creating these innovation clusters, if you may, which is about industry, academia, and startups collaborating together in one environment. Some countries have done it and they've done it very well. I think we have each of our states are like, equal to one of the countries or sometimes much larger than multiple countries in Europe. And if we could make sure that each of them take one area and scale and grow on it, some in agri, some on renewables, some on manufacturing, some on pharma, we have a huge opportunity. There's no lack of talent that learns. There's just that if we can create that environment where these three things can come together, it will be a tremendous opportunity for us to be really global best across the world on multiple areas. And that's like all of us agree. And I think to a certain extent, the government can play the role of a startup investor, because at some point of time, the industry's also got to pick up on how much to put into R&D. But once the government gives that fillip to it, then you'll see a lot of motion to pick up. So it's probably that one area that we probably all want to focus on.
Great, guys. These were the questions I had. This has been a very insightful conversation. So
thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sindhu. Thanks, Jagdish.
Thank you. Good talking to you. Thanks, guys.
Bye.